In this age of social media, there's so many trends. How do you keep up? Well, I'll tell you how you keep up by doing you, boo-boo. I'm a fashionista and a trendsetter, but I'm also a trend-setting designer. So today, let me unleash upon the world my latest masterpiece. I'm Pat, this is Nesbitt Design Co., and I give you Cookie Wall. So the first step in making this masterpiece was obviously to debark all these cookies, and most of them went pretty smooth, but that burl was one tough cookie. See what I did there? Next up was flattening them, put those on my Woodpecker's Pro flattening sled and made quick work of it. Once I got them all flattened, then I actually went back and cleaned up all those cracks because, well, who likes a dirty crack? So once I got them all cleaned up, I actually wanted to stabilize all those cracks in this walnut cookie so they didn't, come crashing down in pieces later on. Actually, to do this, I busted out my slab stitcher kit, so this makes it nice and easy. And some of my favorites are these slimline bow ties. I just like that little bit sleeker, modern look. But you can see with the jig, so easy with their template to just route all that out, clean up the edges with a chisel real quick, and then you're ready to pop in some glue and then pop in your bow tie. And just make sure when you're doing this to be careful not to get too much glue in there because, well, you don't want to have to clean your crack again. So once you got it all knocked in there, best thing to do to actually make sure you don't have any gaps is actually sand it a little bit while you've got the glue in there, and it'll hide any cracks at all. So actually for one of the cracks on this walnut bow tie, I wanted to give it a little more pop and pizzazz, so I used a brass bow tie. But for this, I need a little bit of 5-minute quick epoxy because, well, it's metal and, wood glue doesn't stick to that. So after getting those cookies stabilized with some bow ties, the next step was figuring out how to get these cookies hung on the wall. So I actually found some Z-clip style brackets at Home Depot, but I wanted to make them recessed. So I made a quick jig and actually used that metal template from Shepherd's Bracket for floating shelves to make the template, and it worked great. So once I got that bad boy made, I just got it located on my cookies and screwed it in because, well, you're never going to see those screws anyways. And then I actually used the same bit from that Shepherd's Bracket to actually route out all the recess right there. So these little hook brackets I found at Home Depot are actually super cool design, super easy and foolproof to install. So what I did here is though I went ahead and pre-drilled everything with a self-serring bit just to make life easier later. So next up was sanding, everyone's favorite pastime. One big thing I always do is I water pop to raise that grain so I get a nice smooth finish. And another thing I do to make sure I get a nice smooth finish, especially on those edges, is actually get a foam sanding pad for my sander. That gives me a perfectly smooth, buttery soft finish on those sides. And to get back in those cracks, I actually use some Turner's sandpaper to get all the way in there and get it all nice and smooth too. Last up was just this burl, and I actually found some rotary bits that you can use for a Dremel to clean that all up. And then once I got all of them all cleaned up, it was time to finish. And here I'm using General Finishes in Duravar. You can see that in the background, one of my favorite finishes because it's water-based, but it also still gives you that beautiful amber that everybody loves. So once I got all those cookies prepped and ready to hang, it was time to move on and start prepping the wainscoting. So what I did here is I actually got it's a wall and trim molding from Home Depot. I actually liked it because it had a square edge on both ends, so it actually made it much easier to picture frame. And here I'm just spraying with some regular primer, and then I moved on to the gray to match our walls. So it had a very subtle effect. So once everything was primed and first coated, it was time to start cutting it up. So here I'm using the story stick method. I just made one set for everything of all the one-sided dimensions that I needed, and then I used those sticks to mark everything else. So everything else is going to be the same dimension as all of its opposing sides, and that makes sure you always get a nice square frame. So what I did to glue them up is just use a little bit of Titebond quick and thick and then a little Collins clamp there. And then once it was dry enough, I just pen nailed it to lock it in place. So one thing you see there that I did is I tried to use a stapler to staple the corners as a temporary clamp, and 10 out of 10 would not recommend. After one round of that, I realized that was not a good idea because the afterwork to fix all those little holes was not worth the actual effort. Collins clamps and quick and thick is all you need. So once I got all my frames done, I started that install. So once I had all those frames up, you see I am rocking and rolling with some install. Big thing here that I did is templates. If you know me and if you follow my stuff for a while, you know I love templates. Templates make everything easier. So what I did is I actually started in the middle and I actually set those 2 frames first and then worked out either direction from there, because once I got one plumbed up, it was actually really easy to just keep setting that template, and then I know every other one from there is nice and plumbed too. So one thing you'll notice here that's a little bit odd is, well, I'm shimming up one corner in this frame, and you'd say, well, why make a template if you're still going to shim it? Well, that's called problem solving on the fly, because one corner of my house, like a lot of houses these days, has settled more than other parts. So each one of these frames I actually shimmed up an eighth to get back within the lines of level. So each one is actually at a very, very small level stair stepping down to kind of hide the fact that that baseboard is sloping towards the outside wall of the house. Not an uncommon problem in a lot of remodels, so it's just something you learn to work with. Once I had all the frames set, I just went back and put a little bit of wood filler in all those little pinholes, super easy and fast, and then caulked it all in place. And one tip I've learned from Instagram is actually cutting and rounding the tip of the caulk gun so you can actually roll right through those corners and not leave any extra buildup. It actually surprisingly saves a lot amount of time. And then I actually use a little caulking tool. A lot of people use their finger, but I'm a perfectionist and I like the caulking tool. It just makes it much cleaner and easier for me. Once that's all done, you let it dry and you just paint it. Big thing here is just using a good paintbrush and a quality paint. I love Sherwin-Williams products and Purdy brushes. And this is actually their newer oval brush, and surprisingly, I'm in love with it. So once the paint was dry, it was finally time to hang some cookies. The big thing here, layout is everything, but the easy thing is, it's pretty easy to figure out your center horizontally, and then for vertically, I actually figured out the center of each one of those cookies and measured from the center of each cookie to where I had that recessed bracket mounted. And once I figured that out, I could measure up from the center of these picture frames and figure out where my bracket needs to go. So 2 cool things about these Hook brand brackets is actually, 1, they have a level built in, so that makes that easy, and 2, the screws they include are actually the screw style drywall anchors, so it actually makes it super simple and fast to install. Now here I'm actually showing you where I measured up from the center of each cookie to the bottom of that bracket to get my height for each one, because I actually wanted to align the centers of all the cookies because they're all different shapes and sizes, so aligning the center made the most sense visually. And once I got them all hung up and they were looking good, the next step was, well, to admire my work, and they moved on to installing some lights. Now when I installed these lights, I just took the average distance between the cookie and the top of each one of those frames and just ran that same measurement all the way across. Now these little screws are those same kind of drywall screws I was talking about that actually came with the hook brackets, but they make life so much easier. And typically you don't need a pre-drill, but I like things to stay where they are, and I've used these before and sometimes they can run on you and not end up where you want them. So I pre-drill and get them locked in. Then all I do is pop on my light and these little battery powered guys you can find on Amazon. Perfect lighting. So that's it. That's all she wrote. I don't know what else to say, but look at my masterpiece. And that's it. I'm still talking. Learn from my style. Think outside. Learn from my style. Think outside the box. Be you. Why use chairs when you can use side tables for interviews? Because why not? Because no one puts baby in a box. All right. Because no one puts Pat in a box. Okay. I think outside boxes. Where are boxes? I don't even know.